caring for the least of us along with the rest of us. That's what community is about, and it's never become more evident than during the lockdowns. I recently got to sit down with one man whose job it is to make sure that over 300,000 meals are delivered daily across 7 counties right here in Central Florida. Come with me now as we go on another gorgeous reflection of community.
My for-profit technology career clearly shaped how I think when it comes to business. I had a really good mentor at that point who said, "So what do you want to do?" And I said, "Well, he said, "What do you enjoy doing?" And I said, "Well, I'm enjoying the volunteer work that I'm doing. I'm enjoying the boards that I'm sitting on." And he said, "Well, why don't you go to work for a nonprofit?" And so as luck would have it, a few years pass, and I continued with what I was doing. And one year I got this phone call, and he said, "You still interested in doing the nonprofit thing?" And I said, "Sure, but I doubt very seriously if anybody's going to want to hire me. They probably think I'm going to go in like a bull in a china shop and turn it into some corporation." And he said, "Well, just see." So fast forward, and that was my first nonprofit job. I was the CEO for the Central Texas American Red Cross. I guess you could kind of call it a calling. And as for my mental health, one of the jokes that I used to say is, I'm sure this will add probably another 10 years to the longevity of my life. Not because the work isn't challenging or the work is easy, but I understand the why. And if I'm up at 3 o'clock in the morning preparing for a board meeting, I know why, and I know what that's going to involve, and that I can get behind all the time. And so I'm sure it has a lot to do with my mental health, even though this is clearly on the nonprofit side. It was the hardest I have ever worked. Nothing that I ever did on the for-profit side compared to the things we had to do on the nonprofit side. I mean, the stakes were just so much higher, because now we're talking about people's lives.
Derek came to Second Harvest after spending time in the state of Texas. So I asked him what he thought about this new community he calls home.
The diversity has surprised me. It's a pleasant surprise. Not that Austin wasn't diverse as well, but Orlando in Central Florida has clearly taken it to a new level. I can sit in a room with, as an example, with 4 or 5 people that all look just like me and hear 4 or 5 different accents. I find that amazing. But it also adds some challenges from a cultural perspective in terms of how we respond to that as a food bank, because everyone doesn't necessarily appreciate or like the same types of food. So those cultural advantages that the city has from a diversity perspective in certain cases can be a little challenging for us to allow our friends and neighbors to maintain as much dignity as we possibly can and try and provide them with food that they can really use for their families. When we have conversations about community, and we're basically socialized for our communities to just be our own little echo chamber, and that's not a bad thing by any stretch of the imagination, but there's so much more out there. And we see the results of that. That's why our fractured community is probably why 1 in 5 of our children in Central Florida don't know where their next meal is coming from. Most of us know that there's something that we need to do, but stepping out of that comfort zone and actually doing something is a challenging part. What do we have? We have thousands of organizations like myself, and we're all in our little bubbles, and we're all trying to solve it within our own little bubbles, and we don't have a prayer of solving it. within our own little bubbles. If I can't solve hunger, I cannot food bank my way out of hunger. It's just not going to happen, because hunger is just simply a facet of poverty, which has so many other elements to it, right down to the policy components. And we can't solve it that way. We start solving it when we start acting like a community. And acting like a community basically means we act as a coalition. We speak with one voice. We speak with a courageous voice when it's not popular for us to say that's wrong. And so community is important, because we're not going to get ourselves out of the hole that we continue to dig for ourselves until we realize that that's the only way. One of the things that I'm trying to do here in Central Florida is have as many conversations with my peer nonprofits, just to, one, tell the story, remind people that hunger is among us, remind people that there are well over 500,000 Central Floridians that don't know where their next meal is coming from. 1 in 5 of them are children. And if we're going to solve it, we can't just sit back and say, someone ought to do something about that.
Someone ought to do something indeed. So I asked Eric, what's the best way for somebody to get involved?
There's enough need out there for everybody. So, yes, I would love for you to support Second Harvest, but I also know that everyone's heart is in a different place. You don't necessarily have to automatically volunteer. You don't necessarily have to write a check, but you can tell the story. And that doesn't cost you anything. Costs you when you're at your bridge club or hanging out and having a beer or a glass of wine with your friends. You can tell the story. Did you realize 1 in 5 children don't know where their next meal's coming from? Do you know Second Harvest is now distributing meals at levels they were distributing at during the pandemic? They're back to those numbers again. And oh, by the way, they have less food now than they had back then. The more people that know the story, I think the more we can get people involved in some capacity. What I've found in this life is that people genuinely, the majority of folk, genuinely have a heart to do good. It's just a matter of finding what that is and then determining how to tap into that. If you know someone that needs food, if you know someone that knows someone that might need food, come to our website, feedhopenow.org, and we have a food finder there, a tool there. All you need to do is enter your zip code, and it will tell you tell you where the partner agencies are all across the 7 counties that we serve in Central Florida. And there are around 625 other nonprofits that we support and provide food to, that distribute food. That, if you don't remember anything else, that helps Second Harvest, because that helps our friends and neighbors that we serve. If you want to go further, we can take $1 and turn it into 4 meals. We're very good at that. 97% of our dollars go to services, that we get, and also, we have various ways of volunteering at Second Harvest. So, whether it's packing boxes, whether it's supporting one of the 600 partner agencies that we have, or whether or not, I'll go back to it, it's just telling the story on our behalf.
Telling their story is something each one of us can do. So I hope you'll join me in spreading word about Second Harvest Food Bank.
We know that one of the root causes of hunger is clearly poverty. But how do we adjust that? And when we start talking about poverty, we start having conversations about people just having enough money to get through the month. And what we know and what we learned, especially during the pandemic, is that the face of hunger is not what you think. Traditionally, we would dump it into an unemployed bucket or a homeless bucket. The overwhelming majority of those that depend on our services are working households. to the point that the money just simply runs out. And they use food kind of as a way to manage their budget, because I can't cut back 10% on my rent. I can't necessarily cut back on 10% of my utility bills or my child care services, but I can fudge a little on how much food I buy or the quality of food that I buy. But one of the things that we're doing to try and address that is we have a culinary program at Second Harvest. It's a 16-week program. It's free. We don't charge. And we will probably graduate our 500th student sometimes this year, is what I'm hoping. We boast in excess of a 96% placement rate for those students. But my favorite stat is that 82% of them are still working after the first year. Now, these are marginalized individuals. Some have been on food stamp. A handful may have been homeless. Quite a few of them have lived experience when it comes to hunger. And thanks to some amazing partners like Disney and Darden and Publix and the like, not only are they able to find jobs, but they're able to find jobs with benefits associated with it. That's life-changing for so many people. We're talking about impacting generational poverty in some of these scenarios where no one in the family has really completed anything like this. Everything doesn't have to be a college degree. But what we're after is the way life used to be a number of years ago, where if you worked and you worked hard, you could take care of your family. We've lost that. And something that we're trying to do at Second Harvest is just to give some of that back.
You know, it's such a worthy goal, providing dignity, education, opportunity. That's what community is, and this is our community, Central Florida. I want to thank Derek for sharing a little bit about what Second Harvest Food Bank does, and I invite you to visit their website to learn more. Now, all of the videos in this series have been focused inward on our community, and I hope you'll join us at our upcoming art show where we'll continue to explore those themes. A portion of the sales does benefit Second Harvest Food Bank. I'll be there, as will many of the people I've interviewed. We look forward to seeing you there at Mills Gallery.